Let me just introduce you, Igor. Dr. Igor Sutyagin is a research fellow for Russian studies in the RUSI, means Royal United Services Institute in London. Dr. Sutyagin has a PhD in history and foreign policy and international relations from the Institute for United States Canadian Studies in Moscow. He also worked in this institute for 12 years. Dr. Sutyagin research is concerned with United States-Russia relations, strategic armament, and nuclear arms control and anti-ballistic missile defense system. He has published over 100 articles and is also co-author of the book Russian Strategic Nuclear Weapons. He will present the topic of Russian countermeasures against new missile technologies. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, probably it's a bit too loud. Well, first of all, let me start with just one brief comment about these developments and Russian reactions to that. It's actually very fruitful to be completely sincere, completely honest on all details, and that is the difference between Russian-American and British approach to making political military studies. Americans do know, and Russians do know, that, and that was mentioned, that EPA does have some limited capability against Russian ICBMs. My hometown in Obninsk, in Kaluga Oblast, 100 kilometers from Moscow, it's not far from the site of the 28th missile division of the Russian Strategic Rocket Forces. And the missiles, ICBMs from that site, will fly towards Florida, straight over Polish site, EPA site. These ICBMs can be intercepted. Currently, they carry approximately 20% of Russian Strategic Rocket Forces potential. So there are some details which force to be accurate and which is sometimes necessary to keep in mind to better understand some concerns. But that is an extremely long story about Russian concerns about ballistic missile defense. And I was asked to discuss a slightly different subject, which is Russian countermeasures against new missile technologies. So let me start with that. Well, so missile technologies. Some of them are obvious, and they are like these. North Korea, Iran, that is probably the most concerning technologies, because other countries developing missiles are more or less stable, much more stable than these two, much more predictable, and so there is no reason to concern about majority of other missile producers and missile developers. Nevertheless, Russia tries to keep an eye on missile developments around the globe, and to do that, Russia deploys the new generation of early warning radars around its territory, because the existing network of early warning radars is obsolete technically, physically, and it's good to deploy a new generation, which, as a matter of fact, would be much more affordable for Russia. These radars operates in two different wavelengths, which also contributes to the better reliability of the system, and they are approximately one order of magnitude cheaper to operate. So that is why Russia is currently deploys the family of Voronezh radars, two modifications working in meter waveband and decimeter waveband, approximately 67 centimeters. Deploy them around the globe. And it is extremely interesting to see, to have a look on the plans to deploy. These are two states which I mentioned at the very beginning. Now, that is the planned installations of the Russian early warning radars. 9 of them designed, 4 already operational, 3 under construction, 2 will be constructed soon. And currently, Russia has changed its plans, and the full operational capability of this network will be achieved in 2018 instead of 2020 as it was originally planned, so nearly, 2 years ahead of original schedule. But what is also interesting to see, what is the sequence, how Russia built and put into operation these radars. So, it was the first radar, just effectively a sort of test facility for new family of radars, deployed on the over Baltic. But the second was deployed and covering some very strange and funny area. The third was deployed here, not far from, yes, it's in Kaliningrad. It was the part of the political game. The fourth covered another funny area. And the second, next in the row, once again showed some interesting area. That is currently under construction. And the next under construction, the construction was started 6 months ago, covered once again very interesting area. So, that shows that probably Russian concerns, as putting propaganda aside, are slightly different from what is said in propaganda channels. And there are some additional details which confirm, provides additional evidences for that conclusion. That is the fact that Russia has currently, some specialist tactical ballistic missile defense, well-tested tactical ballistic missile defense systems and units equipped with those systems. That is S-300V, not famous P modification. That is for ground troops defense. This system was originally designed to defend against shorter range ballistic missiles. And currently Russia has 7 brigades equipped with these type of, not exactly this modification, S-300V4. There are older modifications, but still, they are specialist TBMD systems. And they are deployed like that. So, they are deployed here. They were deployed like that until recently. And in last several years, it's several years, not several months, there was some redeployment of those units. And they just show you what happened on the Russian soil. One brigade was redeployed here, another here. One new is going to be formed and deployed here. So, as you can see, half of Russian tactical ballistic missile defense is concentrated just near Iran. And if you keep into account North Korea, it will be a quarter of the rest deployed in these sensitive areas, which means that for the purposes of practical military planning, Russian military and political military planners perceive dangers and threats to Russian security in quite obviously different way from what is said officially and semi-officially for the purposes of propaganda. Russia itself and the Kremlin, and I'd like to underline that twice, that it's very important to differentiate between Russia and the Kremlin, between Russia's interest and the Kremlin's interest. But in this case, both Russia and the Kremlin perceive threats in absolutely different way. The Russian military planning means that Russia is concerned about developments in Iran and North Korea. So, that is about that. And that is quite obvious reason to be concerned, because actually the capital city of my province, Kaluga, is currently within the reach of Iranian missiles. And that is just 200 kilometers from Moscow, without further developments of Iranian missiles. So Russia is concerned about that, regardless of what is said on summits or in official propaganda. Then we have legal reason to ask this question. Are there good prospects for NATO-Russian cooperation on the BMD issues? That was exactly the question I was asked to try to answer. And I would love to tell you about many things, about A-35 old Aldan, which does have name, Russian BMD system around Moscow. It's A-35 Aldan, it's old generation. Current generation A-135 Amur, which also has name, which is deployed now. I would like to tell you about S-500, about, I don't know, A-235, which will be deployed soon, S-1000 Nudol, which will be deployed soon. I would like to tell you about S-350, which is currently being deployed, but I don't have time. So, that is why I try to show you why I am very pessimistic about the answer on this question. Yeah. So I can show you some of the systems which are currently under development, or well, currently under development in Russia. That is like this. LIMJA. It's research and development program called Active Terminal Defense, intercept range 6 to 8 kilometers. It works like this. It's designed to defend, actually it's point defense for hardened targets, effectively for silos, ICBM silos. It has its own mobile variant called Morphei, which will be deployed soon. It is slightly more developed currently than the existing system which inspired its development, but I think it will be interesting for you to know that Morphei and LIMJA were inspired by the operational success of Kipat Barzel, Iron Dome. It was the system which forced Russian designers to restore the system which was under development in the 1990s, finally come back to that idea and restore that. There is another system also under development, also very old. In 1990s it was effectively tested against Russian SS-18 system. It's called Sambo. It's literally terminal defense, just hundreds of meters. It's a sort of mortars which send shrapnel and small arrows to destroy incoming warhead. Once again, it's not about defense of cities or even, well, softer bunkers. It's about defense of hardened, highly hardened point targets, about defense of ICBM silos. Which means that in its practical steps in developing of the ballistic missile defense, Russia is not concerned about this. Shahab is not the problem for Russian designers. That is the second thing. American systems are the benchmark against which the Russian systems are being developed now. And that is just part of the Russian current design activity. Another part is, for instance, this. If you are concerned about Iran, and you are concerned about Iran, you would not probably try to make maneuvering reentry vehicles able to avoid intercept by sophisticated ballistic missile defense. You will not try to defend and equip your missiles with a new, well, in Russian, technical slang, it's called parallel separation system. So you eliminate bars from your ICBM, your nerved ICBM, and you make each reentry vehicle a sort of independent, small independent missile, which separates from the booster all in one time, shortening the period when the ballistic missile system, defense system can achieve, well, many kills with one hit. Eliminate that, well, shortens that period sometime, depending on the amount of warheads, 10 times. That is not about Iran, certainly not about Iran. And if you are going to develop system like these, that famous or infamous Rubezh Avangard missile, it is not about Iran. You do not need to have 20 tons ICBM, which is extremely mobile, which is equipped with maneuvering reentry vehicle, which is tested recently and raised, outcries in, first of all, in American publications about Russian violation of INF Treaty. It's not about Iran. As you can see, it is real. It has already flown on its intercontinental range, and launchers for them are already produced in Minsk. Well, actually, not in Minsk suburban, but anyway, they are produced now. And that is not about Iran. That is about America. And that is where contradiction between real concerns and the practical steps being undertaken by the Kremlin, where that lays. And that is not the only concern in design sense, design terms. There is another concern, and you also know that. That's Killer David. It's David Sling. It is a unique system from the Russian standpoint because Killer David is being advertised as the anti-Iskander missile defense system. It's the unique example, as far as I know the history, it's the unique example when one specific defense system is advertised as aimed against specific missile system, and that is the newest system being marketed by Russia, Iskander, marketed for arms export or deployed with Russian armed forces. As a matter of fact, Iskander has not been deployed in Kaliningrad. That is another rumor, but we can come back to that. So, Killer David is extremely effective against, and probably I do believe that it is extremely effective against Iskander. So what's the response of Russian designers? And the response is this: Iskander-K. That is cruise missile, which is included into the set of missiles which can be fired by Iskander launchers. And effectively, in this variant with 4 cruise missiles on launcher, you can differentiate between launcher of ballistic and cruise missiles. If you load just 2 cruise missiles, that will be perfectly same launcher. You will not have this raised roof on the launcher. It will be perfectly same launcher. You cannot differentiate what that launcher carries before it fires. So, overloading, oversaturation, well, probably there are lots of air defense specialists here knowing how that is good. And knowing how it's difficult to deal simultaneously with high altitude target and low altitude target. And the point is that Iskander-K is designed to fire, well, it can carry 1 ballistic and 1 cruise missile. And it can fire both in sequence, and the period would be 30 seconds. So it is the way to negate Killer David. One of them, at least. And the additional reason to be concerned about this is this. That is the cruise missile, which is which is part of Iskander-K missile system, 3M14. The point is that, well, effectively everybody who had a look on that and measured that should have doubts whether this is really 300 kilometers range missile. Because to fly 300 kilometers, this missile, with known fuel consumption, this missile must be empty, absolutely empty. Because fuel tanks, if you make some measurements of this missile, you will see that it can fly at least 2,000 and maybe more, keeping in mind that currently it's equipped with a bit more modern engine than it was original Granat from which it was developed. Interestingly enough, Russia and the Kremlin does not try to hide the fact that this missile is designed for much longer range. For instance, RIA Novosti, which is state-owned, state-operated information agency, quite openly published the information that Iskander-K complex is designed to employ cruise missiles with the range over 2,000 kilometers. I think that is the reason to be, well, at least to ask some questions. Not the issue raised by Finnish studies and saying that ballistic Iskander, can fly more than 500 kilometers. They say between 700 and 900 kilometers. Well, it is not the case. With the existing fuel, solid fuel in that missile, it cannot fly longer, much longer than 500. But the point is that you can find 3M14 on Iskander. That might be serious. And Iskander is being marketed by Russia. And even if Russia will fill, this missile with, I don't know, something like plastic, it will be empty with just tiny fuel tank, it is probably possible to modernize it upon arrival. And then you immediately have missile with range of 1,000 kilometers. The additional step, and as a matter of fact, that is 3M14 as it is shown on air shows on international air saloons. But not this cruise missile of Iskander as it was fired in Kapustin Yar. And actually, it's easy to see that the actual missile is even longer than that which is displayed on international air show. So it's certainly not about 300 kilometers. That is the subject to consider. Yeah. Okay. Well, and the additional news. Famous Yakhant, in Russian service it's Onyx. It's part of Bastion coastal defense missile system. It is not far from here, it's in Syria. It was deployed there. But the problem is that Russia openly announced that Yakhant Onyx already has been modernized, and the new seeker was installed on these missiles, which provided Yakhant Onyx capability to attack ground targets, land attack mode for this missile, with a range of 300 kilometers. Well, it's not exactly hypersonic missile, it's approximately 4.5 Mach, but it's extremely high supersonic missile attacking something on land 300 kilometers from launcher. It's probably another reason to consider. And that is also lays upon Kilet David. But I do not want to tell you that Ballistic Iskander is completely forgotten. Iskander itself is highly maneuverable missile, and as you can see, it's controlled along all the trajectory, even after the boost phase. On the passive part of the trajectory, the missile still controlled, and I show you the elements of this gas dynamic control upon trajectory. So it is extremely agile, but its opponent is also extremely agile. And it's not that good for Rosoboron expert to recognize that, your product is not first class. So what to do in this situation? What Russia is going to do? The point is that Ballistic Iskander, has extremely important reserve for modernization. The fact is that this missile is designed along the old Soviet design rule, which means that for preservation of stability, in-flight stability of the missile itself carries huge chunk of metal. It's, not the wisest approach to design missiles, but still, Ballistic Iskander carries huge chunk of metal inside of it. And I show you the actual Iskander as found in Gori in 2008, after three of Iskanders were fired against Georgian city. You can see that it is really large piece of metal. Well, that is not in scale. The actual diameter here is approximately 30 centimeters. And you can see it is Iskander. 322 K5 is the cluster bomb warhead of Iskander. So that is where the potential to negate Kilet David lays. Iskander carries substantial reserve mass, or reserve of potential mass to be deployed there. And the idea is to disrupt attempts of intercept via use of some bit exotic system which will blind Kilet David. And interestingly enough, Russia has already, the Kremlin, Russia doesn't matter in this case, has already announced that Iskander, Russian Iskanders, they have been already equipped. It's probably the only in the world currently, the only short-range tactical ballistic missile which carries its own penetration aid set. And it carries extremely interesting things. Explosive, EMP devices, which upon explosion, they send very strong electromagnetic pulse, which leads to oversaturation, you know, that bridge between P and N area in semiconductors. So oversaturation of this bridge with electrons produced under the influence of that EMP leads to each and any semiconductor-based equipment make it non-operational for the period between, well, at least several minutes, actually hours, to several days, as it was proved on tests. And, well, I put these cards here, but I can tell you that this device is just slightly larger than this bottle. But it is effective. It can blind effectively everything semiconductor in the range of approximately 400 meters. So if Iskander detects launch of Tel Aviv, it deploys these weapons. And, well, it's the matter to consider. And as you can see, it is, in some sense, in military sense, it's much more promising than American approach to that. That is Atropos. And I'd like to underline, to attract your attention, that the name which was invented for this system by Russian designers, Atropos, it was not it's not occasional, it's inevitability. It's Greek for inevitability, which means that employment of these, as it was designed, employment of this sort of device inevitably will lead to disruption of any attempt of intercept. That is very interesting, and that is quite affordable in terms of military designers, because compared to the similar American system based upon devices known as Verkater. Well, American Verkater, combat Verkater, was employed in Baghdad in 2003. And one explosion over Baghdad TV station put that station out of operation for 2 days, due to the very same reason. Everything semiconductor, based on semiconductors on the TV station, was just put out of operation. And it took 2 days for these semiconductors to restore the semiconducting capability. But it was 2,000 pounds bomb. And that weights, well, for instance, this device weighs approximately 180 grams. You can imagine how many Atropos Iskander can carry with that huge chunk of metal if it will be removed and, instead of that metal, you will install Atropos or something like that. So, another example, just to remind you the scale. That is the American Verkater, and that is the scale. You can see difference between Russian and American system. That is serious. You cannot install this on tactical ballistic missile. You cannot install this even on strategic ballistic missile. But it's quite easy to deploy these on the tactical ballistic missile. And that probably adds new dimension to the ballistic missile problems, even in this country. So, that leads me to the conclusion that regardless of the concerns about Iranian danger, the practical steps being undertaken by Russia is about negating American, Israeli, Western systems, which means that the answer on that question about prospects for cooperation between Russia and NATO is very, very pessimistic, actually negative, because you cannot cooperate if you simultaneously try to negate your partners' systems, which means that we have to recognize that probably, well, it is not that good. And at this moment, if I have half a minute more, I'd like to comment on very briefly comment to Emily Landau's statement. You mentioned that Russian objections against ballistic missile defense is fueled by Cold War time motives. I would say it is not fueled. It is not fueled by Cold War time motives. Just the opposite. It is fueled by the perfect realization of the post-Cold War time realities, which are the situation when Russia is losing its international influence. And effectively the only way, as the Kremlin here perceives, the only exit from that situation is to preserve the Cold War style situation, Cold War time environment, because it is convenient and it is the only way. Russia currently has just 3 weapons to restore and preserve its international influence: oil and gas supply, veto right in UN, and its strategic potential, nuclear potential. Oil and gas is undermined by Americans. That terrible shale gas revolution, it's, well, terrible thing. Veto in UN Security Council. United States and the United Kingdom have perfectly shown on the Libyan example how they can get around it when they got Russia to abstain on resolution about Libya and then vetoed any Russian attempts to raise the question, to put it into agenda to discuss further. So it can be negated. So strategic nuclear potential or nuclear potential is the only tool which the Kremlin perceives as remaining in its possession. So that is why Russia is interested in preservation Cold War time environment. And that is why probably we should not rely on cooperation. Yeah. Thank you.